Alrighty, folks, welcome back to another video from Yates Computers Tips and Reviews. Well, this is about security this year for these videos. And for one of them, I don't remember if I've mentioned it before or not, so I decided to make another video. This is about RAID. And RAID is not a backup video. So head on over, pause it, subscribe, hit the bell, head on back, because this is pretty important stuff to understand. I don't know if a lot of people at home or in businesses are running a RAID on their server. I said server. And most businesses should be running a RAID on their server. How many businesses are running RAID on a workstation? Well, that's kind of a catch-22 with RAID, and to understand what RAID actually is. RAID is actually multiple copies of the same data. Depending on how you set up RAID, you can copy data, as you can mirror it, or you can RAID a drive where you can split drives, where it basically combines them together so you have more space. Where that would be useful and helps performance factors is the old spinning mechanical drives that could do one process at a time. If you got, I would say, lucky, it could do two processes at a time because it looks at one drive, looks at another drive. RAID, again, if you're copying, is not a backup. Usually what RAID is good for in that purposes is if your first drive completely fails, your system will boot to the secondary drive that's the copy of the first. If that data gets corrupted or something happens on the first drive, it will be copied and cloned to the second drive and continue running until it fails or the total encryption or the malware or whatever locks you out. It will be locked out on both drives. So it is not a backup. I've heard some people start mentioning that because a lot of people really do think RAID is a backup. RAID is just an additional copy of your original disk. What happened to your original disk will happen to your copy. Copying your data to a USB drive as a backup is actually a backup because it is not a live copy. It is not constantly copying data over. It is a screenshot or a capture at that moment of your data. So it is not up to date and current all the time. That is kind of the default between the RAID array setup when you boot to the have the two drives to boot. That if one drive fails, your workstation or whatever will run until you're able to change that out and get that cloned back over so you have two drives again. It's a redundancy fail-safe system. It's not a backup. RAID 5 uses multiple disks, so if one fails, it clones over to another one, keeps running, you change out the bad one, put in a new one, you have a backup. Redundancy. It's not a backup for ransomware, viruses, any of that type of stuff. That is completely different. It has always kind of been pressed that RAID is kind of a backup. It's not a backup. You can configure RAID configurations so it copies once per day over or multiple copies per day. And that's where they kind of got the idea that that's a backup because you have a copy that's done at 9 a.m. to that disk's. It's not a live full RAID. But again, if something got in there on a certain time and then affects it, it can affect both copies. So I wanted to press that point. This would be a nice little short video on that people are aware. Because I've heard it marketed that way. Oh yeah, just get RAID and you're fine. Do a RAID 10. Red tear, mirroring and striping is not a backup. If you have a major corruption in your OS or whatever, it could take out absolutely all of that. Having that backup, having that restore disks, having those best practices in place, you still need them if you're running RAID. RAID is a good feature to have to prevent, I would say, minor incidents from happening. Simple little drive going bad and your system being down. Yeah, that you have redundancy. There's a cost to it. There's a lot of other features to it that come into play to have RAID. But again, RAID is not a backup. RAID is a redundancy on keeping the operating system and the computer running. So they're different. And I wanted to specify that in a way that people understand, because I'll have another video coming out here probably right after this about your backup securities and a couple other things out there that are concerns today about backups. So thank you all for watching. Hit the subscribe, hit the bell so you can get the new follow-ups that will be part of this. Thank you so much.